Prevention is Cure podcast with me, Prof Grant
and Kayla Lenfernadelamat.
We're the research and development team at Pre-Cure. Prevention is Cure. Little AMA quick-fire session today we've got going. Quite pumped about this session.
Yeah, really pumped to get into the topic of dopamine. And you were just having a we gander on the internet just before we hopped on, and you saw something that Andrew Huberman had posted that you thought was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit off the actual dopamine topic, but according to Huberman, here are the top 10 trending topics in the podcast and health world. Starting at number 10 is creatine. So we've actually covered creatine in a previous podcast, so we're on money with that. Quick summary: what does creatine not do?
Creatine does not make you jacked if you don't train.
Yeah, it doesn't pay your mortgage off.
No.
But it does increase a whole bunch of probably mitochondrial function things that are related to your health and human performance. So get into that. Number 9 is blue light. I don't know why blue light is trending so much, but I guess the idea there is that the midday sun wavelength is high, and actually screens are high, LED screens and LED lights for that matter are high in blue wavelength light. Blue wavelength light doesn't penetrate the skin much, but it actually affects a little bit in the skin, and so that's to do with vitamin D production if you're getting it from the sun, so that's a good thing. It suppresses melatonin, which is a good thing, the sleepiness hormone. So think camping, you're outside all day, melatonin is suppressed, and then as the blue wavelength light disappears, melatonin comes up, you get sleepy. The other thing I've been hearing a lot about blue light recently is that it fragments mitochondria.
Tell me more.
Well, there's a sort of, I was just actually listening to, it might have even been a Huberman Lab podcast. No, it was actually Tim Ferriss' podcast, but it was Andrew Huberman's ophthalmologist mate.
Oh, okay.
Who was, because there's quite a lot of discussion around this in the health world that I walk in and out of, which is, don't wear sunglasses, be careful about, you don't need to be careful if you want the midday sun and all that stuff. And he's going, actually, blue wavelength light fractures mitochondria, which is not what you want, actually. And so put your sunnies on. So that was an interesting take on blue light.
Yeah. Number
8, sunlight, especially vitamin D. Well, I guess it's related. We just talked about that. And we've done a whole podcast on Vitamin D. So we're 2 out of 3 so far, maybe 3 out of 3. 7, gut microbiome.
Yeah, and I suppose this talks to the fact, like at Pre-Cure, we teach a framework about plausible ways that nutrition can interact with your health and with your body, and one of those things is the impact that what you put in your mouth can have on the bugs in your tummy. Yeah.
I mean, we cover this in one of our courses, like we do a whole course on the gut microbiome. There's such interesting stuff here at one level, and there's such unknowns at another level in the microbiome, in my opinion. I guess what I would say is that there's some really convincing studies. You have proof of concept studies, like you have a mouse that's raised in a germ-free environment, has no gut microbiome. You implant it with microbes from another mouse, and things basically disappear. Yeah. Like literally, reading one study yesterday where there's a reversal in dementia.
Wow.
Does that mean that if you take probiotics as a human, you'll reverse your dementia? Well, no, not quite yet. But I reckon it's the most exciting bit of science that isn't developed yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been around for a while, but I think that the leaps and bounds we're going to see in the coming years in gut microbiome science as more researchers sort of cast their attention in that direction is really exciting.
The most memorable thing from doing the course on that, I reckon, Kayla, was the discovery that you do a fecal microbiome sample.
Yeah.
So what comes out, you analyse that for DNA of different species, and you can look at that. So first of all, that's great, but there's not just microbes in there. There's fungi, there's viruses, there's a whole virome, mycome, these things. And then there's phages, which are a combination of bacteria and viruses as well.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that are floating around in free space near the bottom of the gut. The actual microbiome, as it operates, is actually not just floating around in free space. It's in a mucosal layer.
Yeah.
And that's where the actual active biome is. Who knows what that looks like compared to these other ones. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is, testing methods have a long way to go to be able to understand really what does the microbiome look like. And so the next one is circadian rhythm.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good one. We've touched on that, I guess, in our fasting podcast, because when you eat also affects that body clock. It appears not just to be across the whole body, which it is, but in individual cells as well. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. The fact that, on a cellular level, there is sort of this 24-hour clock that's going on that is signaling good times to eat, not so good times to eat.
At the very other end of circadian rhythm is the fact that shift working is bad for you.
Yes.
On every single parameter that you can measure in medicine and psychology. And so all you're doing when sometimes I get asked to go and do a seminar about shift working is damage control. And what I'd much rather say is get another job.
Yeah.
It's not practical, obviously, but I think that's a reality of it.
Yeah. So the next one is, I love how it's in inverted commas, nervous system.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means. What do you make of that?
Well, I suppose, at the moment there's a lot going around in blogs, on podcasts about sort of that bottom-up approach to mental health, to, breathing techniques, to don't focus on the mind, focus on the body, focus on the somatic side of things. I mean, that's definitely popular.
Control the nervous system, control your emotions.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a cool idea. Box breathing,
Yep.
in and out through the nose. We'll turn on the sympathetic nervous system, the calmness. There's a sort of halfway in between that, in the nose and out the mouth.
Yeah.
We'll still keep it pretty chilled. And in and out of the mouth will activate the parasympathetic, so you might be more activated, and perhaps if you're exercising hard. That's nervous system. Number 4, I guess we've done a podcast on this purely because we interviewed Dr. Matthew Phillips, metabolic neurologist, mitochondria.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to that podcast, I'd definitely give it a listen. Matt is so articulate in explaining some really complicated science, and makes it really digestible for anyone. So have you got anything additional to add there around the mitochondria sort of angle, Grant?
No, just that we did the Future of Medicine conference in Hamilton last week, and we had over 300 people turn up to that, which was awesome. Dr. Phillips did more of a public-facing talk than a clinical medicine talk around his trials, which was interesting. And he did make a really good point, which I just want to talk about quickly now. I think it's a really important one. It's like almost everyone has one feature or more of the metabolic syndrome: high triglycerides, high visceral adiposity, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, low HDL. Those are the 5 features of metabolic syndrome. So it's almost ubiquitous. It's the new normal.
Yep.
That is the antecedent of, all chronic diseases. And his hypothesis there is that we're in a constant state of what he calls glucosis.
Yeah, I like that term.
Which is a funny term, actually, because I guess I tried to write it down in the Choose Your Hard book, and it corrected it as hyperglycemia, which is correct.
Yes.
But he's calling it glucosis. But, I've just got elevated glucose and other associated hormones.
But consistently, I think that's the thing that he was really getting at, right? Because you're always eating, you're never giving your body that chance to recover, that it's just constantly high all the time.
Yeah, so that's right. And so he said the features of the metabolic syndrome are simply normal response that you'd expect under those conditions of the body trying to protect the mitochondria from exposure to excessive glucose and reactive oxygen species. So these are all features you would expect. Insulin resistance is a good example. Central adiposity are a good example. You're simply making it harder for glucose to get into cells, or you're moving glucose and other nutrients elsewhere. So that's an interesting thing. So metabolic, poor health, the new normal, and away we go. Okay, HRV stands for?
Heart rate variability.
Okay, so this is the idea that the time between heartbeats is variable.
Yes.
And that the higher that variability, so the more difference there is between time between heartbeats, generally that signals that, I guess it's related to number 5 as well as being number 3 out of its own, that your nervous system is a good measure of how your nervous system's going.
Yes.
I've never actually found it that interesting on me, but I think the major problem is I don't like to wear my watch at night when I'm sleeping where it wants to get the measures, so I never get proper measures.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And does it correlate with anything other than nervous system regulation? And
Well,
shifts?
there's quite a lot of work in athletes and overtraining and stress and load and stuff like that. I do actually use it with some of my athletes, but what we should do, that reminds me, we'll probably try and see if we can get Dr. Dan Plews on the podcast, who's a physiologist, an expert in HRV, so that would be cool. Number 2.
Cortisol, I love it, in brackets, alas, usually badly misconstrued. And I think that kind of sums up that you type in the word cortisol and you're on social media or just the general internet, the things that you see are just something that are just outright wrong.
Yeah, so cortisol is a stress hormone, but then I think what that means is people see high cortisol is bad. And of course, cortisol varies across the day. Like you need cortisol to go up to wake up.
Yeah.
So you want high cortisol going up in the morning. It's like constantly high cortisol. Stress of the HPA axis is an issue, I suppose. But then you see that very quickly turn into adrenal fatigue and then women's health issues. And I actually don't know what to make of all of that properly, to be honest.
Yeah, no, me either. I find the space confusing. I don't know if the research is typically robust in that space. I wouldn't be able to speak to it, but yeah, I do often see the hop, skip, and a jump from cortisol's the reason you're not losing weight. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, which is potentially true. Okay, and number 1, drum roll, on the Andrew Huberman top 10 trending internet and podcast health things is?
Dopamine.
Right, so this is why we've decided to do a podcast today on that whole reward pathway. And so we'll do some basics, and even if you know this stuff, I think it's worth just walking through this again, because it's a good thing to be able to bang out at a barbecue, or maybe you're just that person, everyone's like, oh my God.
Again.
My one night all week and I'm ending up talking to this loser about dopamine.
So do you want to just step us through some of the basics around what is dopamine and why is it important to know about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd say if you want a more in-depth look at this, at the sort of level we're looking at it now, then I thoroughly recommend Dr. Anna Lemke, the Harvard psychiatrist, Dopamine Nation.
Yeah, excellent.
Or any of the sort of long-form podcasts with her, because she does an excellent job of the sort of pain-pleasure seesaw as we're talking about it. So I guess there's sort of 2 dopamine pathways. One's a slow pathway, and it doesn't mean that it's slow in obtaining it, but it stays around for longer and doesn't have the same sort of mismatch of homeostasis. I'll explain what that means in a moment. But say you exercise, or you go in a sauna, or you hop in an ice bath, then this is sort of slow dopamine. So dopamine is called slow dopamine because dopamine rises, but then it stays up for actually a few hours, and so you feel good. And I suppose the easiest way to think about that is in terms of motivation, is you were really cold, or you were hurting a bit from exercising, and now you've stopped, and you're sort of getting that rewarded feeling from doing so.
Yeah.
And it actually lasts for quite a while. That's quite pleasurable. And I think most people are. And we sort of, there's probably the endocannabinoid opioid system involved in that, the sort of runner's high and all that stuff. That's a sort of related but separate ongoing thing as well.
Yeah.
So you feel good, but you know, it doesn't go up massively high, so you feel good, but you're not high.
Yeah. You're feeling good.
You're not on methamphetamines.
No.
Even if you've doubled your baseline dopamine, you haven't 10 times that or 4 times that you might get with gaming or something.
Yeah, which I mean that's typical, right, of substances. You're seeing massive spikes in dopamine.
Yeah. So that's the hard or slow dopamine. The fast dopamine is a whole range of things in society, both behavioural and physical. But I like to talk about nicotine actually, because nicotine does raise dopamine, but it does it to a reasonably high level,
Yeah.
like 4 times it, and depending. But then there's a homeostatic response to that. So the body starts to need more and more nicotine to get the same amount of dopamine, the same amount of feeling quite good. And so that's obviously called tolerance.
Yep.
I understand there's addiction words now. And then baseline dopamine now falls. And so when you haven't got the nicotine now, instead of feeling the pleasure side of dopamine, you actually feel pain,
Yeah.
which is withdrawal. So withdrawal and tolerance are the hallmarks of dopamine dysregulation, reward system dysregulation. And you can see, I think most adults know about smoking, and then we now know about vaping. In many ways, vaping's worse, at least for a reward system. It might not be worse for your lungs, although it's probably not good for that either.
Yeah.
It could potentially dysregulate some more, because you can simply deliver more nicotine with a vape than you probably can with a cigarette.
Yeah.
Yeah, purely because you're not inhaling a noxious poison with 1,000 other poisons in it at the same time. Although I could be wrong there, having not vaped ever. Okay, so we've got a cool little diagram that we're thinking about here in terms of the evolution of society, which sort of falls into Anna Lemke's dopamine nation. Do you want to take me through that?
Yeah, I really like this because I've been banging on about slow and fast dopamine for ages. But, on the first sort of row, we talk about athletics. So playing a sport, like you said, that slow rise and then that gradual taper off as you come off. And then we talk about fast dopamine. This might be watching a sport. And the dopamine culture, getting an even faster hit, might be gambling on that sport.
Right, so it's sort of progression across society in the last 30 years, really.
Yeah.
So sport went from play sport to watching sport to gambling on sport.
Yep.
Next
and
one.
Journalism went from newspapers, you've got to wait for it to come out,
Yeah.
to multimedia, so now we're listening on the radio or watching on TV, to clickbait. Everyone is competing for your attention. Your attention is a commodity. Video, we went from film and TV, probably in black and white with no sound, to having video, and now to having reels of short videos. I mean, you hop on any form of social media and you are constrained to less than 60 seconds worth of time.
I like this music one. Albums.
Yes.
Which we, like when I was a kid, you had to go and buy records.
Yes.
And then tapes and then CDs. And then tracks, I guess that's Spotify.
Yeah.
And then it's going TikToks.
Oh, we had a conversation about this, my hubby and I, about the fact that artists used to compose albums, CDs. It had a story from start to finish. And now there's a song, actually, I can't remember, by a rapper, and she says, oh, and now I'm just making music for TikTok. And so even artists can feel this sort of demand to get music out as quickly as possible. There's no more creating a narrative, creating a story.
Can you remember any names of classic albums from your era, or are you too young?
Probably too young, eh?
Because Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense, very famous album. U2, Rattle and Hum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, U2, Joshua Tree.
I definitely couldn't rattle any off. But
what's the Paul Simon one? Graceland.
Nope.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
And then like communication, right? We used to handwrite letters. You put them in the snail mail. And then we had the ability to call people and email them. And now we're talking in text, talking in shorthand all the time.
I always find that one weird. It's like if you went to text, if text was the only means of communication and then they introduced voice, you'd think you'd be like, oh, that's an improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then relationships, there used to be the whole courtship to marriage sort of lens, and then we had obviously the 70s rise of sexual freedom, and now it's you swipe for a partner on an app. You don't even get to meet them in person anymore. So just,
there's issues with that. Because attached to this, where I got this from was this, if you understand this graph of male versus female perception of the opposite sex.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, and so what is it? It's the women are essentially looking for a 10, and they won't settle for anything less than a 10.
Yeah, or an 8+.
Or an 8+.
But there's virtually no men in that category according to their ratings of other men that they actually see.
Yeah.
And men have a more uniform distribution.
Yeah.
Less picky.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting how it's this, I don't want to wait anymore. I want things now and I want them
Yeah.
in big doses.
Yeah. Hey, what we missed that one. Images.
Oh, yes.
View on a gallery wall, like the Mona Lisa. View on your phone.
Scroll on your phone.
Scroll on your phone.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So the point about all of that is that most of the things that we have gone to the right there now actually raise dopamine to higher levels. A good example is Jonathan Haidt's work in Anxious Generation, where he and the work that he does with psychologist Jean Twenge, good website they've got if you just Google those guys up, and they've got this living research document, like a 300-page stuff of all things you can just go and have a look at. They've done a really good job, and I really do rate their book, Anxious Generation. That part of the problem for our youth mental health crisis, and so just to remind people in New Zealand, I think I've said this in previous podcasts, but the National Health Survey 2005, 5.6% of young people on the K10 distress measure had severe psychological distress at that point in time. Can't cope with society, not mentally ill, they just can't cope. And girls usually 50% higher than boys, although that's even accelerated more recently. And New Zealand, like in every other Western country, in around 2012 to 14, everything accelerated upwards and has continued ever since, such that the last National Health Survey, it's more like 25% of young people have severe psychological distress at any one time, and girls are more like 33%.
That's insane. A third of our young girls can't cope with modern life.
At that point in time, but more like 50% in that area of their life won't cope.
Wow.
So that's a really interesting thing. And so the question that they put forward is what's caused that? And I think their argument is around particularly excessive screen time.
Yep.
But the story for girls is different than the story for boys, which we'll talk about in a moment. But how does that intersect with Lemke's dopamine nation work? Well, so the argument there is that maybe you're not actually talking about depression and anxiety at all. You're talking about a sort of reward derangement syndrome, or a malfunctioning, or not malfunctioning, and out of normal homeostasis reward system.
Yeah.
So you're on social media, it bangs up dopamine to high levels. It promised pleasure. It was fun for a while, but because of tolerance and withdrawal, you've now got pain. But the same's true of gaming.
Yep.
The same's true of porn. The same's true of junk food. The same's true of vaping. The same's true of alcohol. The same's true of other street drugs, cocaine, methamphetamine especially. And so if you're on a few of those things, then you're probably going to have a dysregulated reward system, give or take. And so you're going to be in psychological pain.
Yeah.
And is that, the question is that what we're seeing in our
young people?
In our young people?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? We were talking just before we hopped on the podcast about how, in years past it was substances were the main sort of addiction pathways, drugs, alcohol, nicotine. And we've seen this uplift in behavioural addictions and the degree of separation, especially for young people, between, them and getting alcohol, them and getting drugs is a little bit removed, whereas they've got a phone in their hands 24/7. There's a lot of stuff going on at the moment trying to make gambling more accessible in New Zealand. So there's just these...
It's an accessibility thing. So as a teenager, you could still find alcohol, you could still find cigarettes, and you could still find drugs, but actually you had to go out of your way.
Let's try the
And you weren't going to do them in your bedroom in front of your parents.
No.
Well, maybe people did that.
But I mean, like that, that accessibility, the level of trying required to get these huge dopamine hits. And from really young ages, if we think about how young some people are getting phones and access to social media, so...
Yeah, so that's the hypothesis. And the question is, why are girls worse off than boys, and why is that getting further apart? And Haidt's argument there is that there's a story for boys, which is actually gaming. Social media is not such a big thing for boys, especially the likes and stuff.
Yeah.
The same reason boys sometimes care about their haircuts or their clothes, but sometimes they just don't actually give a shit. Like your younger brother might not, they're less affected by social criticism
Right.
than girls, and he gets into some biological reasons that I can't quite remember actually, but it sounded good at the time, around that, and they tend to use it more. And you're really comparing yourself with unreality as well.
Yeah. I mean, even the rise of AI and the fact that a lot of the people on social media and right now and in the years to come won't even be real people. So you're not even comparing yourself to a person.
Oh yeah, it's true. It was bad enough. It was bad enough that, in fact, you were watching people's lives that were some fake version of themselves.
Yeah, and photoshopped and airbrushed and all that kind of carry on.
Now they were never even real in the first place. Yeah, well, that's pretty shit.
The other thing I was thinking of is there a difference in the way in which girls use social media versus how boys use social media?
Probably.
That kind of use for interaction, use for good versus just like doom scrolling.
Yeah. Yeah. The question is, some boys do get lost as well.
Yeah.
And Hate's argument is that there's about 10% of boys get lost in gaming.
Right.
And it's actually really quite a big loss.
Yeah.
And his argument is it doesn't sound like much, 10%, except for that's 10% of our adolescent boys. That's actually quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you sort of end up with the reward derangement syndrome and socially isolated down that hole. And we've seen people will be familiar with that, which is a sad state of affairs. So that's a sort of reward derangement argument around modern mental health, really. And I suppose we've covered the dopamine system. We probably should do a little bit now. I think we were planning on, it's a criticism of this whole thing is it's not just dopamine, and you talk about it like dopamine's the feel-good neurotransmitter.
If dopamine's it's the want. It's the we were looking at some research in gambling before we jumped on, and it's that near win, that almost win that keeps people coming back, not the actual win itself.
Yeah, so I think there are two reward systems.
Yeah.
So there's the opioid system.
Yep.
And that's operational from actually getting rewards as well. And then there's the dopamine system, which is more around actually anticipation, so almost winning.
Yeah.
Oh, we were so close.
Got so close.
Yeah. It's a head and it just needed to be a tail. So close.
And you see this, right, of like when with gambling on sport, betting on sport, you see this, it's those near wins. Oh, I almost made $300 this weekend. I'm like, no, but instead you lost 50.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps people coming back.
Yeah.
Keeps them
I
hooked
almost
in.
got the trifecta and I got first, second and ninth.
Yeah.
No, you didn't almost get it. You were just as not close as anyone else.
And I think what's really interesting in this space is there's this sort of causality clue. When we look at people with Parkinson's, for example, who we know that some of the medications do lean on D3, for example, and those dopamine agonist medications. And what we can see is that about 13 to 20% of people with Parkinson's disorder with this medication actually have real problems with gambling.
13 to how many percent?
13 to 20% actually end up developing a gambling problem.
A gambling addiction. Jeez. That's astonishing. I mean, it's got to have a massive effect on the reward system because just to get yourself in I couldn't develop a gambling addiction. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Because I would never start. I don't buy lotto tickets. I don't believe in that idea. I'm just not interested in gambling. Like I would never start it. So the fact that, nearly 20% develop 1 in 5 is an astonishing thing. But that speaks to causality, right? Because you interfered with the dopamine signaling system, given them more and interfered with it, and actually now you're seeing a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think as we start to wrap up, it's really interesting, right? There's food addiction and addictive behaviours, hedonic eating is kind of starting to become an area of interest for us as we hear the ultra-processed food conversation blowing up, and the role that GLP-1 agonists can have in this space. So should we sort of change track a little bit?
We should do that. I mean, I know you've been interested in this area for ages, and in fact, now that you're about to start your PhD in a different area, let's face it, you're probably not going to be there might have been a point in your life you did a PhD in food addictions.
Oh yeah, probably 12 months ago, if you'd asked me what would my PhD be in, I think it would have probably been food addiction and behavioral sort of aspects of that, and how can we support people? Because I know you've talked about it a lot, but right, the environment is pathological. There's up to 60% of food in people's houses, not even just in the supermarket, is ultra processed. And there's variable sort of research out there about food addiction. It's not really well understood.
Yeah.
But yeah, changing tracks.
Yeah, well, I guess it's one of the sort of surprise effects of GLP-1 agonist drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic is that they actually, because when you first think about, before I knew about these drugs, before they were invented, I would talk about GLP-1 hormone signaling from the gut and satiety and other things, but I was never thinking about addictions.
Yeah.
But these agonists seem to somehow help with the dopamine pathway and food addiction. So people who have previously reported big food addiction or actually had other addictions like smoking and stuff found it easier to give up when they were taking those medicines. So that is a positive side of those, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some research beforehand, and I don't want to get the figure wrong, but about 30% of people in one of the studies reported that they no longer had an issue with binge drinking. So, like, there is a direct
from the GLP-1
from the GLP-1 agonists, and so it's a double-edged sword for sure. But I think when we think about food addiction and hedonic eating, and we think of the fact that the widely cited statistic is about 14% of people at any one time would meet the criteria, the WAFAS. So that's a Yale study around food addiction. But you talk to anyone in the space, and they go, that number is ridiculous.
Oh, so I think I like Dr. Jean Unwin's work.
Yes.
With the craved model, and I think she would claim somewhere between 20% and 33% of people probably meet the criteria for food addiction, at least according to her.
Yeah, her framework.
Should we have a quick look at that framework?
Yeah, and so I think what's really interesting about this framework is you can do it on yourself. I would encourage you to. Each letter in the framework stands for something. The first one is C, compulsion. You feel a strong, irresistible urge to eat certain foods, even when you try and resist them.
Do you have it?
Yes.
I only have it if I eat shit food for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think we're wired slightly differently than that.
Yeah.
I can fast or ketosis or low carb my way.
And it goes away. Yeah, no, mine is a food noise radio, always on.
Okay, C, reaching for more.
Reaching for more. You need bigger amounts over time to get the same satisfaction or buzz. This is like building tolerance. Yes, I would answer yes to that one.
Yeah, anyone, recently I've just slightly gone off the rails eating my mother's chocolate chip cookies.
Oh.
They're quite sugary, and I haven't had any sugar for ages. And
that you reach for another and another.
Yeah.
So activities, neglect, or growing neglect of activities. So what this means is overeating makes you quite tired. You get that sort of hangover type of feeling, or you feel unwell, and then you don't do normal activities.
No, never had to do it.
I haven't had that experience either. The next one is volume. So you lose control over the amount that you're eating. So you'd plan to eat X portion, and instead you end up eating a portion much larger. I've definitely experienced that one with yummy food.
Ice cream, peppers all the time.
Yeah, ice cream chocolate's my one.
Chocolate as well, actually.
When people go, I just leave a block of chocolate in the house all the time and I have one square when I like, I'm like, and unheard of in our household.
Not a thing.
Exclusion due to withdrawal. So cutting back triggers at least 2 withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, irritability, low mood, or physical issues. So you avoid stopping.
No.
I would say probably about 3 years ago when I tidied up my diet and I did a whole bunch of things, I would say yes to that one.
Yeah.
And then the last one is damage. So you continue this path, you continue to use food in this way, despite knowledge of the damage and the problems it's causing. And this can be anything from weight gain to mood swings, anxiety, depression, or like down the further end of the track, it could be really severe chronic health conditions.
Yeah, I've had that on occasions. Yeah.
Yep, I've had that on occasions. I've been heavier than I am currently, so I can answer yes to that one. So I think what I really like about this tool, it's not a diagnostic criteria, but it's a way to gain some insight into the way your relationship with food.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, modern food is designed, just to be clear, by food companies to be an addictive substance. And there's sort of particular combinations of sugar and fat designed in a way to help move dopamine maximally.
Yeah.
That's in the design process.
Yeah.
And I think they've been successful. Now, people will vary, and like honestly, do you end up with a sort of salience for some things, like a particular combination? Like, so if I have cold beer and a bottle with a long neck,
You're going to eat a whole bag of chips?
with salt and vinegar chips with dip.
Yep.
Like I'm literally not stopping.
Yeah.
I could. So there's a sort of salience context as well. I think that speaks to what other people experience with cigarette smoking and being at the bar or the pub or whatever.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is that there is definitely a push in this space to call it ultra-processed food addiction, because for many people, I'm not going to put a bowl of broccoli down in front of you and you're going to be like, oh no, I can't stop. It's going to be those foods that are designed to hijack your reward system. And Jen actually has said some really interesting stuff about how for some people, low carb can be really great, but actually that there are still foods within the low carb sphere that people can find really challenging to moderate. And two of them that spring to mind for me are cheese and nuts. And so sometimes it's even removing those from the diet for some people.
Yeah, well, I think there's an individual variation in this. Like, I think between us, you're more easily addicted. I'm not impervious to the addictive effects of food.
Yeah.
But I'm more resistant than you are.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. It's not a willpower thing. It's just the way our physiology is.
Yeah, and I think that leads us to these two milkshake studies that I found. There was one in 2023 and one in 2025. And essentially what they did is they gave people milkshakes, and then they measured how much dopamine was released in their brains using PET scans. Yeah. And so the 2023 one was like, we could see some pretty big changes in dopamine in the brain. And then the 2025 one went, there are some changes. But what really sparked interest for me was they reported that the inter-individual variability was so vast. Yeah. And it actually wasn't correlated with obesity, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So it was just some people, their brains are wired differently for different things. And maybe if they changed the food, dopamine would have looked different in the brain. So I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I describe myself as moderately low on willpower so far as food goes. Yeah. But that doesn't quite get me into the addiction category. I think I just suck sometimes, whereas I think you're more likely to suck more often.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. For me, the art of the setup matters, definitely when it comes to nutrition behaviours. So I think we can kind of do a rapid fire wrap up. 5 questions for you, Grant. What is dopamine?
It's a neurotransmitter that's associated with reward. You want it to be in its normal Paleolithic homeostasis. In other words, it gets raised by sex, whole food, being thirsty, and exercise.
Yep. And what's wrong with the current environment when it comes to dopamine?
It's super normally raises it, and that means you get withdrawal intolerance.
And so what does this mean for our young people?
I think it means that you end up with a dysregulated reward system, and now you're in constant pain, and that's unfortunately defined by society as being mentally unwell.
And if people want to learn more about dopamine and behavioural addictions and all this sort of stuff, where should they go?
Or they could come to a pre-cure course, but if you're not going to do that, then what you should do is, I think, get onto a Huberman or actually a Peter Attia is probably even better, because I think it's a little bit more technical, might suit that type of person. Podcast and listen to Lemke and Haidt.
Awesome.
That's a wrap. Prevention is cure. Hey, it's Grant here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We don't advertise. We're never going to, but we have one request for you and one only. If you felt this show was worthwhile, can you please rate us, and please rate us 5 stars. That's it. Thanks very much.